The state attorney's office says it will not file charges after the death of Daniel Taylor. The 30-year-old Jacksonville man died a year ago after investigators say he got into a fight with officers while in custody at the Duval County jail. News 4 Jax reporter Joe McLean dug through the final report, and he's joining us live now from JSO headquarters. Joe, as we've reported, Taylor was in the process of being released at the time this altercation happened.
Yeah, he had pleaded no contest to a trespassing charge he was facing. He had been picked up for trespassing at the Omni Hotel in downtown Jacksonville. He was sentenced to time served, but according to the state attorney's final report, as Taylor was being processed to leave the facility, that's when things turned violent.
A 38-page report from the state attorney's office explains why it decided not to file any charges after the death of 30-year-old Daniel Taylor. The report finds Taylor refused to cooperate with jail staff as he was being processed to leave the Duval County pretrial detention facility, and that a fight escalated, which lasted more than 30 minutes. At one point, the document says Taylor bit an officer and later slammed his own head on the ground, leaving a forehead cut. Officers called JFRD to provide medical help, but described Taylor as having superhuman strength, fighting off 6 to 8 officers. Still, the report claims none of the jail staff used any weapons, pepper spray, or any excessive force. A toxicology report would later reveal that Taylor had drugs in his system, including amphetamine and methamphetamine, drugs that officers say he had to have taken during the 12 hours he was inside the facility. Taylor was eventually taken to the hospital with new charges of resisting arrest with violence and battery on a law enforcement officer. But Taylor died a week after being admitted to the hospital. First responders had used ketamine, a common tranquilizing drug, to calm down Taylor. While the two pathologists that reviewed Taylor's case agreed that the ketamine was not a contributing factor in his death, they did disagree on what ultimately caused it. Dr. Robert Bushbaum concluded that Taylor's death was a homicide, while Dr. Stephen Nelson wrote in his report, quote, "Because Mr. Taylor has insufficient traumatic injuries to explain his death, I would not certify his death as a homicide. Because, in my opinion, amphetamine and methamphetamine played a role in his death is an accident." Ultimately, the doctors agreed that the corrections staff did not use deadly force on Taylor. In the conclusion, the state attorney wrote, "Our role is to evaluate, review, and pursue criminal charges when law enforcement use of force is not justified. We have conducted a thorough review of the evidence in this matter. Based on this and our review of applicable Florida law, we will take no further action in this matter."
I also reached out to some members of Taylor's family today to get a reaction to this. I'm told they spent a large part of the day in the state attorney's office in the lead up to the release of this final report. I did not get a response from them at the time, by the time of this broadcast, though. Reporting live, I'm Joe McLean, Channel 4, the local station.
Joe, now that the criminal probe of this death investigation is over, can you take us through what happens next?
Right. As any time a case like this happens where someone dies in law enforcement custody, of course, the first question to ask is, were any of those law enforcement personnel to blame? So the criminal investigation gets underway. Once that is completed, which is what happens now, that's when the internal investigation, JSO has a policy, an internal investigation happens now. That is what will happen next. Back to you.
All right, Joe McLean reporting to us live. Thanks, Joe.